My fiancé forgot to hang up the call, and what I overheard the night before our wedding completely shattered my world, a heartbreaking secret that changed everything. So, I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I was all set to get married last week, but I totally bailed the night before the big day. I was engaged to my boyfriend, who's 26, for 6 months, and we had been together for 3 years. My now ex-boyfriend and I have 2 kids together as well, twin boys aged 1. We didn't really plan on having them, and my boyfriend was totally not on board with the idea of having kids at all. I was pretty stubborn and told him I'd be having them whether he was in or out. I told him he could leave and didn't even ask for child support. I thought I could totally handle raising my kids by myself, no matter what came my way. I've always had this really strong maternal instinct, and honestly, the timing just felt right for me. I was all set to be a mom, but he just needed a little more time to get on board. That's what he said when I told him I would break up with him if he kept trying to pressure me into not having the baby. Only then did he seem to come around. He'd been a good partner throughout the pregnancy and a good father after their birth. We totally didn't see twins coming, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have handled it all on my own, so I'm really glad he was there for me. Once my sons came into the world, he stepped up and did all the dad stuff, and just 6 months later, he popped the question. I totally said yes. It felt like that whole thing where he insisted I get rid of the babies just never happened. He was that smooth. I guess pregnancy has made me a bit softer, so I let it all go and was totally ready to marry him. We had already been together for 3 years and went through a pregnancy, so I thought this was the right moment. We spent months planning, and I was super happy about it. My parents were super happy since they really liked my ex. He was just the ideal dude. But then, one night before the wedding, everything went sideways. I can't believe that one phone call ended a 3-year relationship, but I guess it saved me from what would have been a pretty terrible marriage. The day before our wedding, my ex and I were crashing at different spots, just like everyone usually does. I was hanging out at our house while he had moved to his family's spot, which was only a few blocks away. After dinner, he gave me a call to say he loved me and was super excited to marry me. That really hit me in the feels. We had a moment while we were on the call, and then we said our goodbyes, and I waited for him to hang up. Well, he totally forgot to hang up, so here we are. I think he must not have clicked the screen hard enough, which is a common habit of his. I hung around on the line too since I caught his dad chatting with him. I was just curious, so I ended up eavesdropping on their chat since his dad had just asked my ex if he was talking to me. When he said yes to his dad, my ex seemed pretty down and distant, and I could tell something was off. I can't stop replaying the conversation from last week in my head. His dad asked him if he still felt the same way as he did 2 days ago, and he was like, yeah. Then his mother joined the conversation as well and told him that no matter how he felt, he needed to go through with the wedding. My boyfriend got a bit heated and told them he'd do what he wanted, and they couldn't boss him around like that. His dad came back with the idea that while they couldn't make him marry someone he didn't care about, they could totally leave him out of the will, so it was up to him. His mom then went on to give him a talk about how, now that he was a dad, he really needed to step up and be responsible. It was already a bit of a mess that he had kids before tying the knot, but he could still turn things around by just going for it and getting married instead of dragging his feet because he wasn't feeling ready. If he was up for having kids, then he was also up for getting married and making that commitment. So, his mom said that, and his dad was on board too. My ex was going on about how unfair it was, claiming he was basically forced into marrying me when he wasn't even close to being ready, just so he wouldn't get left out of their will. He said they were being super unfair and started venting about how it feels like no one in his life really cares if he's ready for big moments or not, and he always ends up handling things he's not ready for. I wasn't worried about whether he was ready to be a dad, and honestly, neither were his parents. They made him stick around with me even though the thought of having kids freaked him out. And now they were totally pushing him to get married, even though he still didn't feel ready for it. He was going on about how unfair we were being to him, and then I guess he just stormed out and left his phone behind. His parents kept going on about how irresponsible their son was being, and that's when I decided to hang up. I was stunned and didn't have any idea what to do next. My boyfriend only said yes to marrying me and sticking around because his parents were threatening to cut him off from their will. That was totally something I wanted to figure out the night before our wedding. I just couldn't wrap my head around it for a few minutes. I had no clue from his behavior that he wasn't ready. Yeah, we did have that fight when I first found out I was pregnant, but after that, he was always a great boyfriend and dad, so I honestly had no clue that he felt this way. He was definitely a great actor. I gotta give him that. After I got my act together, I figured it was time to make a break for it. Luckily, my kids were with me, so I hopped in the car and drove to a hotel just outside of town. I got there pretty late, and the kids were getting a bit cranky, so I just put them back to sleep, blocked my boyfriend and his family without saying anything, and that was that. I spent the whole night crying, realizing that this past year was just one big lie. I finally crashed around 4 a.m. The wedding venue and all that stuff were taken care of by my ex's parents, but they had plenty of cash, so I wasn't too concerned about the money being spent. After all, this was all their idea, so the three of them could suffer the consequences. I was out of there. Right before I hit the hay, I shot a message to all my friends and family letting them know the wedding was off and that I'd fill them in later. I didn't share any other info. I figured they'd show up at the wedding too since I had made it super clear that I didn't want them anywhere near my ex or his family, and I definitely didn't want them reaching out or responding to them at all. I had faith in my crew, so I figured they'd just get it done without second guessing me. I ended up spending my wedding day at the hotel, just munching on snacks and hanging out with my boys because they were the only ones I really wanted to be with at that moment. I was really bummed out and feeling down, but I had to keep it together for them, so that's what I did. After taking a day off, I thought it was time to head back home, grab my stuff, and move out of that place. I dropped the kids off at my parents' place first, and when I finally rolled in a day later, my ex reacted exactly how I thought he would. He seemed super tired and really on edge, and I still can't figure out how much of it was real and how much was just for show. He was like, "Where have you been? I've been super worried about you." He didn't even wait for me to chime in, he just dove right into his story about how he and his family had spent hours waiting the day before. He mentioned that what I did was totally unacceptable and that I needed to explain myself and apologize publicly because having cold feet wasn't a good enough reason to embarrass him and his family like that. I didn't really say a lot. I just mentioned to him that I caught the chat he had with his folks the other day. He seemed a bit lost for a moment, and then, once it clicked for him, he had the decency to look embarrassed. I just didn't feel like explaining or chatting with him after I said that. I headed into the house while he hung out in the yard, grabbed what I needed, and took off without saying anything else. I really didn't have anything to say to him, to be honest. He went with his gut, and now I'm just doing my own thing. I just wasn't feeling the whole wife thing anymore. I really just want to be a mom now. And a great one at that. It's been almost a week since then, and we haven't talked since, so I figured that was it for us. We had nothing to say to each other, and it was totally fine. I figured that too. So, a little while back, he popped by my parents' house, asking to chat with me. At this point, I had definitely filled my parents in on everything that went down, and my close friends were in the loop too, so they were pretty hesitant about letting him come around. I decided to chat with him one more time. I was hesitant to let him in since I didn't want us to end up arguing and yelling, especially with the babies just having fallen asleep. I really didn't want to wake them up. We just chatted right there in the front yard. He said sorry for all the stuff he put me through and mentioned that he really loves me, even though he's not quite ready to tie the knot yet. He mentioned that he loves the kids too, and despite everything he said that night, he still wants to be involved in our lives. I was totally at a loss for words and wasn't sure if I could trust him, especially after all the lies and the whole performance he'd been putting on for nearly a year. I totally get why I had my doubts. I mentioned that I'd think about what we should do next. He's not ready to break up just yet and wants to figure things out, giving us another chance without his parents getting involved, or so he said. I really have no idea what to say to him. I want my kids to have a good relationship with their dad as they grow up, but I just can't trust him at the moment. I definitely need a break because this week has been wild, and not in a fun way. What if I choose not to give our relationship another shot? Update 1. Hey, everyone. I know it's been a bit since I last checked in, but I've been swamped with work, the kids, and moving out, so I just haven't had the chance to catch up with you all. I've been blown away by all the support I've received, and I'm really thankful for all the love from so many people. I'm super grateful for all the advice I've gotten. It's really helped me out a lot. Yeah, I've chatted with a lawyer about the custody setup. I want full custody of my kids since I've made up my mind not to get back together with my ex. Some folks began hitting me up with nasty messages, calling me a selfish mom just for thinking about getting back with him, which was totally ridiculous and judgmental. I'm a mom, but I'm also just a person, and it's only been a week since that phone call night. Yeah, I definitely hadn't completely moved on. It was a 3-year relationship, for crying out loud. I was super emotional and really loved him, so my feelings kind of took over, and I thought about getting back together. I'm feeling way more stable now, so I get that no matter how I feel about everything, I gotta put myself and my kids first. No way I'm getting back with him. Honestly, there was really no reason for all that hate and judgment to happen, but hey, it's the internet, so I probably should have expected it, right? I began searching for a lawyer just 2 days after I called off my wedding. It took me some time to find someone I felt totally at ease with and could really trust. My ex and I never really talked about custody and all that because we never thought we'd actually be in this situation. Now that we're finished, I feel like it's time to get some legal stuff in place to make sure no one can take my kids from me. I doubt he'd even be interested, but his parents might feel differently. They're pretty traditional and stick to their beliefs, so I bet they wouldn't be cool with their son not having custody of the grandkids and will probably try hard to change that. I'm just getting ready. I chatted with my ex about 3 days ago, and we haven't talked since. It just shows that no matter what he claims, he's not really ready to be with me and isn't looking to change. What he said the other day about wanting to make things work felt pretty empty because if he really meant it, he would have at least reached out to me, but he hasn't. I'm pretty sure I'm doing the right thing by not getting back with him. Honestly, there's no trust between us anymore, and I'm not going to stick around with someone who doesn't want to be with me. This is for the greater good. I'm planning to share my decision with him soon, and I really hope he doesn't get upset about the custody situation because that's the last thing I want to deal with right now. Update 2. I finally let my ex know that I'm not interested in getting back together and also mentioned that I'm planning to file for full custody, just to keep him in the loop. I thought he'd be cool with it since he had already said he wasn't ready for marriage or kids. I figured he'd appreciate that I wasn't pushing him into something he wasn't ready for. But he really didn't handle it well at all. Instead, he started arguing with me and said I couldn't do this to him. He mentioned that I could totally break up with him if I wanted, but I just couldn't take his kids from him. That would totally make sense if we had a regular relationship, but that's just not how it is. So, you all know that my ex was never really into the idea of having kids. Just a week ago, he still wasn't feeling ready to be a dad. So, out of nowhere, he was going for custody of his kids? I had a feeling something was off, and his parents were likely still trying to pull the strings. He was freaking out while I was arguing, and I was just trying to chill him out since we were meeting at a restaurant, and I was getting super embarrassed about the scene he was making. Eventually, he chilled out a bit, and I figured I'd try to have a sensible chat with him since I really didn't want to get into a long custody fight. I was totally broke and just didn't have the energy for that at all. I figured his parents could totally swing the best lawyers too, so even if I felt like I had the moral high ground, they could still stretch things out. I figured my best move was to talk it out with him and just cross my fingers he doesn't push back on this. I was just trying to point out that he had been saying he wasn't ready for kids until like a week ago, so this seemed like the best way to go for everyone. I look after the kids, which is what I wanted in the first place, and he gets to live his life however he likes, no strings attached with marriage or kids. I figured that's what he wanted, so this was the only way to go. But he mentioned that he had a change of heart and now he feels ready to be a dad. It just didn't make sense to me, and when he said he was ready now, it totally felt like something was off. If he wasn't feeling ready to be a dad for a whole year, there's no way he suddenly changed his mind in just a week. I asked him if he was holding back anything, and he confessed that he was pushing so hard because of what his parents had said. Well, look at that. So, after the wedding got canceled and I let him know I was in the loop, he went ahead and told his parents about it. They suggested he should sort things out with me right away, so he came to talk to me about a week later. They mentioned they were cool with the fact that I wasn't going to marry him anymore, since that was out of their hands now, but there was no way they were going to let him lose custody of their grandkids. They were at it again, saying they'd cut him off if he couldn't get me to agree to a joint custody deal. He was almost pleading with me to go for joint custody of the kids, but I was so fed up that I just walked away. I seriously couldn't believe he was once again going along with what his parents wanted, especially since I had offered him an easy way out. He wasn't really into the idea of being a dad. He wasn't ready to settle down with me. But what he really wanted was his parents' cash, which is why he was going to all these extremes. If that's all he was into, then I didn't want him around our kids at all. They totally deserve more than this. I really didn't want child support at all because I just didn't want him around or involved with me or my kids anymore. He really didn't stand up for himself and was ready to do whatever just to keep his parents in his life, which was honestly pretty sad. It's been a couple of days, and I've gone ahead and blocked him everywhere again because I just don't want to deal with him or see him at all. The last message he sent was about moving forward with a joint custody agreement, and he mentioned he'd share his inheritance with me when his parents were gone. I can't believe he's actually throwing this nonsense out there just for fun. Well, I suppose this is what happens when you fall for a spoiled brat to begin with. I've built my own path and made it on my own, no handouts needed. Yeah, my folks taught me a lot, but we weren't exactly rolling in dough, so I had to count on scholarships to get through college. That meant putting in a ton of effort to get to where I am now. So, my ex? He was the only kid of super wealthy parents. I guess I don't really have anything more to add. You all know the type of person I'm talking about. I really thought he'd changed when we started dating, and he totally made me believe it too. I totally messed that up. He's such a talented actor. I was totally convinced for like 3 years. But now I can totally see him for who he really is, and I'm not interested in hanging around to learn more about him. I'm all set, and I'm cool with raising my kids by myself. A dad who doesn't want to be a dad is worse than having no dad at all. I'm totally convinced I made the right choice, and I really hope he realizes it too and just ends his parental rights instead of dragging this out into a long custody fight. I'll keep my prayers going. Update 3. Hey, what's up? Hey everyone, I've got some awesome news to share with you all. Hey, I know it's been ages since I last updated, but I've just been super busy. So, here's the deal. My little ones and I have settled into a cozier apartment, but hey, it's mine. Way better than that house I shared with my ex. This spot is close to my folks' place too, so they can swing by now and then to check in on the kids. I've got a full-time nanny on board to give me a hand since I can't seem to stop working, you know? I'm really lucky that I can actually swing that right now. My parents are totally helping me out with the money stuff, and I'm really, really thankful for it. I get that they didn't see this coming, and honestly, neither did I. But they're really trying their best, and I'm super thankful to have such loving and supportive parents. Alright, let's get to the part everyone's curious about, my ex. So, he totally gave up his parental rights. Not sure what got into him or what shifted, but I'm thinking he finally decided to push back against his parents. Or maybe his folks just threw in the towel. So, a buddy of mine mentioned he's moved out of his old place, so I'm thinking it's the former. He said sorry to me again a few days ago and mentioned he wanted to give me some cash as a way to make up for it. But I wasn't going to take cash from my ex. I get that some of you might think this was a dumb decision, but honestly, I'm not too bothered by it. No joke, I really meant it when I said I'm done with him. I let it go, but that doesn't mean I'm cool with taking anything from him. I just want to move forward, and my parents and I can totally handle raising my kids without him. I shot him a text back saying it was cool, but I'd prefer if he didn't reach out anymore, and he's been cool about it so far. At the moment, I'm just all about my kids and making sure they have the best life I can give them. I'm done feeling sad or angry about my ex. All I want now is to be a great mom to my kids. That's all there is to it.